Thank you. It's so good to be here. And I want to echo what Angela and we were introducing here about being here today, that we've all taken the time to come from, I came from California, but a lot of you most all of you, is anyone else coming from out of the state? Okay, where are you guys coming from? Michigan, Ohio, Ohio. Okay, so we have a few folks from out of state. Everyone else here is from South Dakota. And why are you here today? Right? That's the question I want to ask you, because we took the time. Every day is very, very precious. You know, God gives us the days to be here on this planet, and today is our day to be alive. So I want to ask you the question, why are you here, and what do you hope to get out of your time today? All right. And you're going to take 30 seconds and turn to the person next to you. Many of you know the person next to you. If you don't know the person next to you, introduce yourself. And if you don't know why you're here, ask, maybe you can brainstorm for a minute. But if you have a certain intention of what you're wanting to walk away with or what you're here for, just have a brief conversation with the person next to you. Why are you here today? What are you hoping to walk away with? If you can bring your conversations back, thank the person who you were talking to. Thank them for sharing. I'm curious over here, who is the guy from Ohio? Was there someone from Ohio? No? Ohio?
Yes.
So why are you here? What do you hope to get from today?
Lord, I'm here to speak Saxon, but I'm also.
Who else is here to learn something? Show of hands. All right. Who's here not to learn something? Okay, so you just didn't raise your hand, but it's true that we're all, I was talking to Chris over here. He's coming from wildlife background. He's now into soil health. And I just think it's amazing that I can walk into this conference, and the first two booths I come to, I got, was yours actually, Soil Health Coalition, and then the USDA, right? Who's here from NRCS? Raise your hands. All right, we got a lot of government in the room. That's a good thing and a bad thing, maybe. I don't know. But to walk in and see the first two have front and center soil health. That wasn't the situation 10 years ago. We weren't really thinking about soil health as human health. We weren't really understanding that we are what we eat, and actually we're feeding the soil and not the plants. And so what we do to the soil, we do to ourselves. And I think right now, because as we look around the world, we have a lot of, we'll just say, dynamic things happening. A lot of different policies going into place. And the earth isn't really political, I don't think. The environment, the bison, the elk, the grasslands, but they're impacted by our actions. And so we have to be really careful and really understand that what we do to the earth, we do to ourselves, and that we're in a very crucial pinpoint in human history right now. And that what we do now is having lasting effects. It's a really pivotal moment. And so I'm here to learn from you all and gain some perspective, because I'm coming from California. I was invited out here, and I've been traveling this last year a lot around the country, talking with farmers, understanding what is the hurdle, what is the barrier from them going to regenerative and going to organic. What's the miss? Like, why wouldn't you do that? And tell me your name again. Yeah, Wyatt. Wyatt was saying, he's like, oh, it's pattern and it's a process and it's what we know. So it's hard sometimes to shift the thinking. And so if we want to really be good stewards of the ecosystem, we have to change some of the ecosystem within our mind of how we approach that. So I'm hoping that I can share in the brief time I have up here this morning and then this afternoon some of the experience I've had. And some of the things I might say might seem, you might not agree with. Some of them you might have questions about. And I invite any conversation or questions or discussion. I'll be here today and all day tomorrow. So I just hope that what I can share today can be of help and service, and that you walk away from today. Who's here just for today? Okay, today's the day. You got to get it all today. All right. And then you have tomorrow. But I hope that when you walk away from today and you go home and lay down and give thanks, that you've gotten what you've wanted out of today. All right. So again, thank you for inviting me here. I'm so grateful to be here. And I woke up this morning, my watch stopped. Not working. I go, oh, that's kind of fitting. We ran out of time. And actually, I don't know what time it is. And it's kind of like, okay, I was talking to the audio guy. He's like, all right, we're kind of in the matrix here. And it's like, yeah, it feels like that a little bit. It's like, okay, what pill am I going to take next? And I'm hoping I can give you kind of an insight into my journey and this idea of how we cultivate ecological systems for an abundance of food. Because there's two mindsets, and you can check it with yourself right now. Are you living in a mindset of abundance or scarcity? And you can flip those words and be like, yeah, I want my buns dancing, and I don't want to be scared in the city. Because that's kind of the two things, is that abundance is an idea that there is enough, we have enough. Scarcity is like you're always needing more. Okay. And if you're in a scarcity mindset, it's natural, because that's what our culture is conditioned us to be in, to be separate, to feel like there's not enough. We need to go out and get ours. But if you're in an abundance mindset, it's like, okay, there is enough. And actually, if I work in my community, there's more than enough. And so I was brought into farming 27, almost 30 years ago. And I was taught at the very beginning that we're building an ecosystem that produces food, as opposed to producing food and needing to be supported by an ecosystem. This is California ecological farming, kind of introduction when I was very young. And I didn't know a different way, but I do come from a farming background. I was born in the Pacific Northwest, grew up in Idaho, outside of Boise, and come from a long family farms from Nebraska and Kansas up to Idaho. So I have Easter's at the Grange and the whole thing. But then I went to California and got turned on to this other way of farming that was very connected to nature. And I went to the ecological farming conference, Eco Farm, and they're like, we're working with ecosystems. And that mindset really shifted things to ask me, like, where do I want to go with this, and why are we farming? That's a question I ask all of you right now. If you have pen and paper, maybe write down, like, where do you want to go with your farming? You're here to learn maybe some stuff about regenerative and organic. Is that where you're wanting to go? If so, what are some of the barriers that are stopping you? And the other question is, like, why are you farming in the first place? If you're going to retire to be a farmer, or are you farming for your livelihood? Like, why are you farming? It's always a good question to ask, especially come August, when it's hot and the days are long, right? Yeah, you're laughing. You're like, you start off now in February. Wendell Berry, many of you know him. He said at the beginning of this season, everything's amazing. You have the vision of what is the potential to be, and you plan it and you get it, and it's like everything's open. But through the season, through pestilence, nature, hard work, and everything, it gets whittled down to the best that could be done, right? And at the end, you're just kind of like, well, and then it starts again. You go and you kind of have the holidays, you come back, New Year, and then you kind of go, okay, here's the next season. What am I going to do this year? And it's hard work. It's really hard work. So I applaud all of you for being, who here is actually farming? Because there's a lot of people that are represent and supportive. Yeah. So thank you. And how many farmers are in our country? Less than 1%, right? So you get in a room of 100 people, you might find one farmer. So the fact that we have a concentration of people here focused on the food system and actual farmers is an anomaly. So thank you. And ask yourself, why are we farming? Some of it's for our economics, some's for livelihood. There's also a connection to land. Who loves being outside? Right? There's a farmer's like, if you're a farmer and you don't love being outside, you might want to change the profession, because that is what, unless you got the really nice John Deere with the whole climate control. But it is being outside, it's being in the elements, it's being connected. We all need to eat. Is there any breatharians in the room? There are some in California, but it's like we all need to eat. And so that is the one thing that I think our world country is waking up to, is that the farmer is one of the most crucial and important people on the planet. They're the ones that are driving the food, that are helping create the food that everyone needs to eat. And we were talking about this on the drive up here yesterday, is that we are conditioned to believe that the farmer is down here and actually doesn't deserve the highest price for their product. They don't deserve to be recognized or seen as the lawyer or the tech person who's making $250,000 a year working 3 days a week in a room. It's like, what is of value? And the farmer is extreme value. And it's a time that we actually like, not necessarily demand that, but walk with the presence of that knowledge that we have so much value in society. Now, regenerative organic agriculture, who can give me the definition of regenerative? Like that. Yes.
It's renewing.
Renewing. Great. It can be popcorn style words. Regenerative. What comes to mind? Renewing. People are like, okay. Resilient. Yes.
Restoring my word of nature to restore that both systems of life and ensure our sustainable.
There it was. Okay. Can you say it again? Not in the same way. Yeah, but it's there. So it's restoring, renewing, regenerating, bringing back health, right? There's like, and the thing is that I don't believe that it should have one definition or one thing. It's like, because one of the principles is context, and every context is different. So one great way, if you need to buy time to think about it, when someone goes, "What'd you learn?" You go, "Oh, we're talking about regenerative agriculture." What's that? You go, "Well, it depends." Just say it depends. That's the great answer for everything. How are you farming? What are you farming this year? Well, it depends. Like, how are you treating your soil? That depends. Because then you can start to engage in the conversation and the thought, and you know the information. You know intrinsically what regeneration is because you yourself are a regenerative being. You eat, you grow, you're coming, but you also are degenerating. And so what are the practices to keep ourselves in a regenerative state? The way I like to think about it is the regeneration, when we look at regenerative and organic, organics are the inputs. You can have an organic farm that is not regenerative. It is an industrial organic complex that is destroying the health of the soil, and it's certified organic, and those are just the inputs. So unfortunately, USDA and through organics, we just shifted the inputs to create an organic system that's industrialized. And the consumer doesn't know the difference between it. And that's one of the reasons why regenerative organic and regenerative agriculture has taken hold, is because the consumer, the market, they want to buy food that has relationship with benefit to the land. And that's what regenerative is like. The practice is looking at soil health. It's looking at how we create a regenerative system, one that actually produces more than it extracts. So one way to just think about it is the regenerative part is the practice that is regenerating, restoring the land, and the organic is really the inputs. Now, I don't think regenerative is the goal. I actually think resiliency is the goal. I think regenerative is part of the system and the practice, but actually we're working towards a resilient system because we're going through a really challenging time ecologically, economically, politically, and we need to be resilient to make it through. So how do we get there? And I actually have a kind of a step. It's all the R's, so you can remember these R's, but there's a reckoning that kind of needs to happen first. Because a lot of people, they jump to regenerative and they say, all right, let's regenerate, let's go for it. And there's a lot of like criticism of that because there's steps, I think, in before. And I actually think a lot of the work that's happening right now is restorative, not regenerative, because we've extracted for so long. But really the first step is reckoning. To reckon with context, where we are today and how we got here. And a lot of that goes with looking at some of the indigenous cultures. And I'll put some context into that. But then we return, once we like reckon, understand where we are, then we go to a returning to relationship with the land, with the place that we're at. And then there's restoration. And I think that this is where when the regenerative, is hitting, all these people, oh yeah, I'm practicing regenerative agriculture. I actually think it's restorative agriculture that's happening because, 200 years of farming or 150 years, whatever it is, and we're extracting and we're tilling and we're doing all this stuff and we're taking topsoils from 20 feet to 4 feet, and then we're like, oh yeah, we're practicing regenerative agriculture. It's like, dude, we're just like restoring natural capital first to like get some balance here, because we've just been exploiting nature a lot. And then once we kind of get to some balance, then we can look at regeneration. And then from the regenerative aspect, we can go into resiliency. So that's my approach after, having been in this now for a while, seeing like what's happening and going around and looking at all the things that are happening. I think it's more of a process than just an ends. And, the biggest part is observations and relationships. Now, a lot of you are bigger growers. You're growing grains, you're doing beef, you're doing rangeland management. I'm coming from vegetable production, small scale vegetable production. So just to be clear about that. But I do have lots of context and been working with farmers in many different scales. But a lot of my experience is from working very closely and intimately on a smaller scale with nature. And from that, there's a relationship that gets built. But whatever scale it is, observation is key, and it's over a period of time. So who here has been on their land more than 10 years? Keep your hand up. More than 15, 20, 30, Ford? Okay, how long in the classes?
Me?
Yeah,
Well, I grew up on the farm, and my brother's got a farm, and I go and sell.
there you go. But you've been there your whole life. Okay, so when you walk out, you know that place. You've seen trees grow. You know how the storm comes through. You know how the water flows. That, as opposed to someone who just comes onto a piece of land, they have no idea what's happening, but you have an intimate relationship with that place. Now, if we can tap into that when we into our decision-making process, then actions you do, what the effects can be, right? It's like any relationship. You do something, there's an effect on it. Now, the biggest thing I want to say is like, when we make these decisions, the one thing we want to do is not to have a traumatic response, which is meaning too fast, too quick. We do something too fast, too quick without observation, trauma results. It's with people too. That's how you create traumatic wounds, right? Is it's too fast, too quick, it can't integrate. So a lot of times slowing down and understanding and observing and going, okay, what's going to happen if I till right now? Where's my soil moisture at? What's the longer term effects? And then if you're going, your intuitive gut is saying, ooh, it's wet, it's pulling over. I probably shouldn't be doing this right now. It's like, oh, but I got to do it because I got to plant my thing. You say, well, but trust the intuition. That's one thing I would say. Like, if you've been there your whole life, and then your intuitive gut is saying like, oh, it's a little too wet, maybe I shouldn't be doing this today. Trust that intuitive thing, because when we don't trust our gut, that's when our gut gets inflamed. That's when we actually get sick. So, and there's metaphorical relationships there to speak on, but just trust your instincts when you're relating to the land. Now, there's 6 core principles, and again, I don't have my watch, and I'm notorious for just going on, so I'm gonna need someone. 9:55. How long do I have? 10:30. Okay, so can you give me like a hand up at 10:10? Okay, 15 minutes. Okay, so 6 core principles of regenerative agriculture. This is coming from, you know, understanding ag, and a lot of people in the space, people know Gabe Brown and these folks, that are like in the definition of regeneration and regenerative agriculture. What are the principles? What are the practices? How do we do it? I've found that these core principles are universal and helpful. I'm going to break them down a little bit. So, and we'll come back to it. So again, context. Everything is in context. Where are we? What's happening? What's the sun? What's the moon? And again, that reckoning component, I'm going to bring that back, because we often just go into context of the biophysical, but there's a social cultural context that if we skip it, if we move through it, it won't have the long-term regeneration and stability if we don't reckon and put into context our social cultural realms. Now, you can approach that in all different kinds of ways, and you can disagree with that, but just allow it to be aware that we are social beings and we're in a social place. And here, I last night I was coming across, driving, and then hitting them, and then like the change of the landscape and the understanding, and then diving in to the understanding of this place. I haven't spent much time ever. This is my first time in South Dakota, and but I've known of the ecosystem and of the plains and of the system that was here because it was one of the most robust soil building systems on the planet here before we brought the plow and brought the industrialization to the tillage of that soil. And how was that created? And, there's stewardship from the indigenous cultures, but there was a relationship with the bison and the grasslands. And that pumping and that movement of 30 million bison across this part of the country was massive amount of rotational grazing, right? Done in a different way of a relationship, not a resource. So right now we see things as resources, we don't see them as relationships. If we can shift that mindset a little bit, I think we'll have a different movement forward. But what happens, and this is people can't quite see it, but that's a mound of skulls of bison, right? And so again, the understanding of this is the reality that we're in, this is what happened, and we're trying to restore and resuscitate a system that is just a shadow of what was here. I mean, in California, the amount of fecundity and richness that was there, the Central Valley, where most of the greens come from in this world, right, was a lake, and then it was the Serengeti of the West, and it had 26 feet of topsoil, and now they're down to 4, right? And a lot of that is from it sinking too because of the extraction of water, right? Diesel pumps that are pumping, 800 gallons a minute to get your Bunny Love organic carrots. It's like, wow, we are really need to shift some stuff here. But understanding that context, and again, my context, this is the farm that I've been on for the last 4 years. So I design and build farms and have worked on different capacities, but it's right next to my friend Ryan's farm, which is 70 acres of veggie production, all certified organic. And in the context part horizon, that's the ocean, right? So this is right south, about an hour south of San Francisco, San Gregorio, San Mateo, San Gregorio watershed coming out. So understanding the context of how we shift. And then I just came, again, I mentioned this earlier, the Eco Farm Conference. It was the 45th annual. I've been going for 27 years. Because I was like, wow, some of these kids are like, oh, you're an elder. And I'm like, oh, really? Wow, okay. I guess when but I definitely don't feel like one. But you get, 2,000 people together every year to talk about this stuff and come with things and share seeds. Who here saves and grows seeds? Okay, like seed sovereignty, seed security is food security. So we need to understand also where our seeds come from. It's really important. Nature, I believe, is the prime designer, and water is the driver of that design. So rain, snow, rivers, creeks, how is the water flowing on the land? How is it getting absorbed into the soil? Climate change is about carbon, but it's more about water. It's about the water in the atmosphere. And if that water isn't getting soaked in, it gets expanded. We're in a finite planet of water, so it's just hydrological cycles moving. It rains, the water runs off, it goes back into the system. It's very different if it rains and soaks in. So the fact that we've compounded the problem through our agricultural practices by not managing the soil so that water can infiltrate and it runs off and it pools, and we see that through compaction and everything. But water is the driver of our design when we look at this. Keeping the soil, so you have context and then keeping the soil covered. Now through, John Kempf, all these different people that are Christine Jones, there's all these soil scientists and farmers and people who have been doing, and Rodale, they've been doing research. We don't need any more real research to know that when you keep the soil covered, you have all these other benefits of regeneration. And there's all kinds of awesome new practices at scale of how we can do this with the equipment we have. But keeping the soil covered is a really key element. Minimal soil disturbance. So when we're terminating cover crops, including cover crops, how we're doing that, how we're preparing our soil with seed drills and whatnot, We want to minimize the soil disturbance. I'm not saying no soil disturbance, but minimal, because we still need to engage with the microbiome of the soil. Some people say no till. Tillage is not bad. A hammer can build a house. It can also tear it down. Tillage is not bad. It's just scale and when it happens. If your soil moisture is off, if you're doing it at a certain scale, it can be the most destructive thing. If you do it at the right time, at the right scale, in the right way, with the right equipment, it can be one of the most restorative things. Because if you have a lot of compaction, we can go on and on about that, right? There's lots of different things. With living roots, we got to keep the roots in there. Maximize biodiversity, whether that's the crops above or the soil below. We have to look at the biodiversity of the whole system and how can we maximize that through our practices. And then livestock integration. So I was at Heal the Planet in Tennessee, and they have water buffalo, goats, sheep, turkey, chicken, all together, rotating, grazing. And he said, these are buffalo, there's bison, these are the buffalo. And I was like, okay. But this is an amazing, farm where they have high production of crop for supplements. So value-added products. You can grow different things, but then how do you integrate the animals into that system for their digestive force, for their manure, and then also for the other things that they provide, meats and things like that. But having the livestock integration is key because there's lots of different reasons why. And we can break that down too if we have time. One thing I want to stress, who here cover crops? Who here hasn't cover cropped yet? Okay. Those that are cover cropping, and if you didn't raise your hand, that's fine too, if you're interested in more cover crops are probably the silent, most critical tool we have in our arsenal of resuscitating soil health. You had a question? No, behind you? No? Oh, okay. But the soil, the using cover crops I have found has been the most amazing resource as a farmer because of what they can do and how they can do it. And they do it silently and you don't have to pay them and they work 24/7, right? Because what it's doing, besides building health, erosion control, it's creating this diversity under the soil. It's breaking compaction. It's opening up. It's mining minerals. And what it's really doing is creating food for the soil microbiome to eat and translate into your crop. This again from that same farm, just looking at right before termination of the cover. This is like about here, right, in May. So we grow all year round there. We're blessed in that way. But the nitrogen fixation, the biomass production, keeping that soil covered is like, if there's one thing when different people come into power and they say, okay, what is one thing that we could do in agriculture? I'm like, if we can incorporate cover crops, just that one simple thing and not have any ground bare, that would be amazing. Time? What's our time? Okay, what? 10:05. Okay, so what's going on with that? We have, the roots, the organic matter. We always want to get some soil organic matter because that is like the thing that's going to build up our water retention, our nutrient capacity load. We want to have the diversity. We want to cover the other techniques of intercropping and relay cropping. When you look at doing a production bed of peppers, and then you say, okay, we have about 45 days, 50 days before we're going to have any canopy of those peppers. Let's grow lettuce all in between that. So we're intercropping with lettuce and we're getting a massive amount of production of lettuce in between in an area that would normally just be open, right? So the intercropping, and in the back you can see there's onions in with that. And then if you notice there's mulch in between the beds, that then, is a little further down, there is some mulch there, but again, lettuces and peppers. But then that gets, changed, same field later, then we decided to do a living. So this is the pathway here of a white Dutch clover. So we're using a cover crop that's nitrogen fixing, covering soil, helping retention, it's pushing organic matter into the soil in between the rows. And that's mowed down, once a month or so. and then growing leeks there, getting prepped for that. So it's like and then the idea of relay cropping, when you take one out, you have something else coming in. And this can be scale appropriate. This can be moved to a larger scale where you're intercropping different things and harvesting them out at different times. So Luke Peterson at A-Frame Farms is a great example. He's over in Minnesota, and we can give you his contact. But he's done some amazing integration on 1,200 acres, growing mainly grains, like a lot of corn, soy, but then also getting into wheat and kernza, and with clovers coming up. And he's on, and then he's integrating vegetables, and he has 50 head of cows, and he's like moving through on a 15-year crop rotation with all these different species. And he's on leased land, 1 to 3 year leases. And I'm like, Luke, how are you doing that? Like, that's crazy, because you're on a 15-year rotation. He goes, no, but that's just the way to build the soil and do that. I go, what if you lose the land? He goes, well, then I move on to the next part, start again. And I was like, that's brutal. And he's like, yeah, it is. But it's the only way I know how I can feel good about what I'm doing for me and my family to farm that way. So he's got a different perspective. And I said, what happens if we give you some land, or you get land long term? And he got so excited he couldn't stop talking, because he's like, oh man, if I had that, and he just got really excited. So here's again, this is like some of the framework that's used, and later Angela is going to be giving a talk specifically on regenerative organic, and these different pillars that we use to measure where we're at within that type of certification. But there's different modalities to use on integrating this. Now, I do a consultation as well, and I'm working with this really interesting, it's the oldest Black farming cooperative in the country, and they're in Mississippi, and they're working to transition, 1,000 acres. Actually, yeah, it's 1,000 acres. They have a lot more. They have like 60,000 acres, but they're looking to do 1,000 acres in 5 years with 10 farmers. Right now, we're working on 50 acres, transitioning to organic, and just coming in the initial time and just planting a cover crop was such a radical thing, because they had never used cover crops, they never incorporated them, and they were on the cycle of triple 13 and doing this, but their community was dying. Brain tumors, cancer, all of a sudden. They said, we have to stop spraying. And they just went cold turkey. They just stopped spraying and started doing organic. And then they're like, and they had all kinds of issues, but they were like still growing good food. It didn't look as good, but they were noticing the taste, the flavor, the health of everyone was doing better. So that was their idea. And when I do these consultations, the first thing I do is look at the soils report, and from the NRCS, their soil data resource is amazing. And just in this little area, and I always have to zoom back because I look at the soil profiles. And so if you've never done this on your farm or looked at it, it's a great thing to just understand the soil profiles and the diversity of soil that is in the geological base rock. So what you're working with in that actual texture of soil, because it's such a perspective of how you can integrate and start to work with the different soils. They had no structural aggregate in their soils. They've been tilling and doing GMO, and Roundup Ready corn and soy for, on contract for the last, 30 years. Well, not the Roundup Ready stuff, but the conventional practices for 30 years. And so there was no aggregation in their soil. It just fell apart constantly. And they said, oh, you should have brought some soil from California, and then we could see what that looks like. And I said, no, actually, let's just go to the forest. And so we went into the forest just 10 feet away from the field, dug up some of that soil, and it just held intact, didn't break down. And they were just like, oh. I was like, yeah, so we're trying to just work our way back to soil aggregation that's stable, and that will have a huge impact on your crops. Integrating hedgerows, which, later this afternoon, I'm going to give another workshop where we're going to break down a lot of these nuts and bolts around some of this stuff. And then we're also doing a lot of crop planning and setting up for success on that. So I'll end the second half of this with the idea of going from this rural to urban and translating that. So up till 2013, I did not live in the city, never lived in the city, and then moved to the Bay Area. And there was a consultation on a question of if they could put a roof they could do a farm on top of a roof. And the designer said, well, you need a farmer for that. And they go, do you know a farmer who does design? He goes, I do. And so I came in and I was just excited about the concept and idea. And that conversation, shifted the next 10 years of my life to integrate agriculture into the urban environment. This is the Ecology Center down in San Juan Capistrano. It's a rock farm that is at 27 acres of production with a 2-acre, right in the middle, there's like a market garden that's just by hand, but the rest is in these like half-acre blocks. It's surrounded by suburbia. They grow everything. They have a value-added product like market and school and this whole community supporting this system. It's an amazing example of how to integrate agricultural production into a very dense urban space. But the idea of how we translate this to scale. Now, this is on a roof, right? With the same practices I was showing on the coast. There's, downtown Oakland and San Francisco, clover pathways, integration of cover crops, integration of succession. So translating it onto the roof, translating it into the urban environment, same practices, same ways. Farmers there are very scarce in the city. Skilled farmers are very scarce in the city. They're not. They just actually don't exist. And yet, where's the market? There's 10 million people that live in this vicinity. And most of the farmers are driving from Fresno and Stockton and down the coast, and they're driving an hour to 4 hours. I met farmers at the farmers market. They wake up at 3 with the truck loaded and drive 4 hours to get to the market at 7 to set up for the market that opens at 8:30. They pack and then they're out of there at 1 and drive all the way home. And I'm like, okay. And yet we're in the city on top of the market, right? So how can the urban farmer take advantage of that proximity, which was my question. And how do we reimagine this food system? And that's the idea of also today to ask yourself, what type of world do we want to live in and how can you contribute to it? What kind of food system do I want to have? And dream big. Dream with the idea of what is it that I want to leave in my legacy? I only have 10, 20, 30, 40 years left in this life. What is it? Why am I here? What am I doing? And so I look at this as like, okay, here's some ideas of goals to do with farming and also how to change some ideas with the food system. No one is hungry. That's a big one. Like, why do we have people hungry when we're wasting 50, 60% of our food? Like literally 50 to 60% of the food for convenience is put in the supermarket, the date goes by and it gets thrown away. Like there should be no, like, and that's just a colonial capitalist food system model that's set us up for people being hungry and scarcity when actually we live in a super abundant world. So people always say, oh, you can't feed the world with regenerative organic. It's like, we're feeding two worlds right now. We're feeding the world, and then we're feeding a ghost world that is waste. That's just going into waste. So we're actually producing enough food on this planet for like 12 million people, 12 billion people is what the FAO says, so it's like, there's a lot of food out there. Quick place-based story. Here's a vacant lot in Oakland. The people are like, we're going to develop this. We're going to put a massive building here. And we want to put a roof on it. Or of course, you're going to put a roof on it. We want to put a farm on the roof. How can we do that? And I always go back to observation. Again, I didn't grow up here. I've never been here. So what was the context? And looking at the context of this and then realizing that there's a 12-foot culvert of Temescal Creek running underneath this space. And that the Italian farmers, when they were in here, they had farms all in this area, and they used to fish off the bridge right at this corner. And understanding that, and then talking to some old people that had grown up there who remembered some of that time. And when there was the Pussycat Theater, they're like, oh yeah, this was the space for that whole scene that was going on, in the 70s and 80s, and you did not want to walk in this area, and then that burned down, all this stuff. And then it becomes a vacant lot. And they said, well, we're gonna put a big building here. This is kind of what it looked like. And they said, we're gonna build this building. We have about 3 years till we get the permit and entitlement. And we're doing this other project that we want you to work on. Is there anything you could do in the space while we're waiting. Do you want to farm it? You're a farmer, you don't have a farm in the city. I said, sure, let's like do something. So this is in March of 2016. And just on that corner, we said, okay, let's plant some cover crop. Let's like put it in. And again, this is a farmer who's, still small scale, 5 to 10 acres, coming into the city to an eighth of an acre, right? So I came in, I was like, yeah, let's farm it. It's no problem. So I just came in here with me and like one other guy part-time and just busted out this little urban farm. Now, people who farm in the city or have nonprofits in the city that have, hundreds of $1,000s of budgets with the cool crews and stuff, but they don't know what they're doing. They're looking at this like, what is happening here? And it's like, oh, we're just farming this little space. And they're like, this is amazing. And I go, yeah, it is amazing. And aha, the urban farm person doesn't have a sense of scale. They don't have any relationship to production, but they have a drive and they want to do it. So that was like the biggest shift coming into the urban environment. It was like, okay, how can we provide some education and training for people who are really interested in growing food? And first we need to provide the canvas for them to do that. So then this is, unfortunately, I don't have the one right before this shot, but this is when that cover crop grew up and we mowed it down. And you can see we started planting hedgerow, like just some, this is again, we only knew we were going to be here for 2 years max. And they're like, really, you want to do something? Like, yeah, let's just like do it because this is the main traffic and you're going to put a big ass building here and you're going to get all this resistance from the community. They're not going to want you to put a building here. But if they know you're putting a roof, a farm on the roof, and that food is going to be going to the community, they're also not going to see it. So let's do something demonstratively. Let's put up a nursery. Let's make those connections. Let's build contracts with the community. Let's build with the chefs, and let's start brokering from the other farmers in the area who are coming to the farmers market. And so, in July, same year, this is what it looked like, right? So it went from that vacant lot in February to this in just, about 5 months. And people are like, wow, okay, this is, yeah. And he's like, yeah, you can transform this. And then this is such a small little production. People are like, can I get some of this food? And I'm like, I really don't have any food. And they're like, you have so much food. It's like, yeah, but it's going to like 2 restaurants. But I have a lot of friends who grow a lot of food and they have CSAs. And so then we became like this broker and we started signing people up, and then when the farmers would then come, we had a drop for them to connect with other people in the area. We set up a nursery because we were also installing another project, and this is what it looked like. And then we transformed. That was it, kind of in the interim. And then this was what they were wanting to build. Okay, so then they're like, okay, this is what we want to build. We want to do a 1-acre rooftop farm. And it'll be the largest one on the West Coast. It's gonna be amazing. The city saw this during the entitlement and said, that is awesome. Yes, we want to do that and all this stuff. And that project um, had no resistance from the community. Everyone was super supportive of it. Now, I'm like, okay, let's integrate a whole ecosystem into it. A lot of this got value engineered out, but it was like, let's build a whole ecosystem on the ground level, do all this stuff. They're like, okay. A couple of these things stayed in. But then the idea here was like, we got these, imagination, and it was really about creating an ecosystem, again, within that ecosystem, because a lot of architects, a lot of people in the city are very attached to what they want and they want to have see. And we are subject to the design, right? As we walk out, as we go in this room, like we're moving through this space, someone designed it and we're subject to how they laid it out. It's just simple. And so the people who designed this, they're gone. I actually know the guy who designed it. He lives in a whole nother part of the world. But all the people in that community are subject to that design. William McDonough gave a great example of who's in charge of the boat, the captain or the crew. What would you say? Who's in charge of that boat? Is it the captain or the crew? Anyone?
Yeah.
Yes. Neither one, right? Because it's the designer of the boat. The designer of the boat is actually the one who's in charge, and the captain can only do what he has. So it's like, what's the design you're working with, and are you able to change it? And so I went to one of my mentors, Michael Abelman, who's doing this temporary farming up in Vancouver. vacant lots, great projects, high production, amazing work, working on 2.5 acres in the urban environment. I contacted Ben Flanner and the folks in the Brooklyn Grange in New York who are doing a lot of, they're the largest rooftop farms, and they had been pioneering that. And so I was like, okay, this can be done. So I started Top Leaf Farms and looked at how, and my thing was like, I'm going to rewild the urban center with regenerative agriculture. And people were like, what does that even mean? And I'm like, well, if you're building an organic system, you need an ecosystem. So we need beneficial insect habitat. And then that's where the pollinators, stormwater management, all these other benefits come from that ecosystem. And I needed to design the soil. And so I left this towards the end because in this afternoon, I'm going to give the talk that we're going to go through like really the technical aspects of this. But here's just the concept of everything was like, I had to design the soil because I didn't like, as a farmer, I was like, soil's key. Right? And roofing companies were designing soil, but it was not really good for growing. They were like, yeah, this is the best urban agricultural soil for a roof. And I'm like, it sucks. Like, I don't know. Like, so we ended up, and biochar was actually the thing that I found at that time. This is like 11 years ago or so. Um, that made it all click because I was like, on the roof, I need stabilized soil organic matter that doesn't break down because I'm working with a certain constraint of weight, porosity, and I also need something that the mycelium can grab onto. I need lots of surface area. I already knew about biochar. I started integrating it, and as soon as I integrated it, that mix really just became the mix to grow in. Amazing, amazing medium that can be integrated in all different ways. Um, I redesigned how you do the rooftop component to basically make these platforms that were um, self-irrigated planters. So the idea that you have a drain wick layer on the bottom so the water goes down and then fills up a basin because you need it to drain at a certain rate for stormwater. And so when it gets down in there and then it pools, and then the capillary roots go through the filter fabric and they can just wick up soil as needed or moisture and water as needed. So it becomes this like super high productive platform. And there's lots of design that went into all the different things, worked with some different architects to get my concepts into CAD. And then they said, well, okay, great, design it. Do you want to build it? And I'm like, oh, God, yeah. And I was like, can I build it? I'm a builder. And he's like, yeah. And the guy was so supportive. He's like, you just get your contractor's license and build this project. And I'm like, okay, okay. And so I just went and got my contractor's license and put together a crew. This project was the first one in Berkeley, which was we were able to blow the soil up onto the roof. We put in the fertigation system, integrated irrigation, and it won all kinds of awards, in 2017. This is kind of a year later after we put in the system, started working on, it was about a quarter acre, worked with six, this is before COVID. And so we were looking at how to maximize our profit. So we worked with these really high-end restaurants to get the highest value for what it was, but we were also delivering the day it was grown. So the story of like the chef was like, oh yeah, this is like, yeah, it was grown, half a block away or 2 blocks away, and it was growing this morning. People were like, wow, and they could taste. The thing was, they didn't really have to sell the story because you could taste the difference, and it was also lasting and being like, it's a really cool system. It's a university housing. You're working with university and students and stuff. Um, what I wish I had done is set up a CSA and had the parents sign the kids up for it. Because I was like going down the elevator with stuff and the guy would walk in. I'm like, hey man, you want some kale? He's like, oh, I'm good. Don't need kale. I'm like, how about some radishes? He's like, oh, no, I'm good. And I'm like, how about some pizza? He's like, oh, you got pizza? I'm like, no, I don't have a pizza bush, but yes, that would be it. And then the parents would come and then they'd be like, this is amazing. I'm like, yeah, you want to sign your kid up for it? Like, yeah, they would. And I was like, oh, that's the ticket. Unfortunately, I moved on from that and gave it to another farmer before I implemented that. But that would have been the ticket. The way that these roofs are set up is very high rotational crops of greens, hedgerows for beneficial insect habitat, windscreen, and then there's perennial herbs of thyme, sage, oregano. The mints, never do the mints again unless it's in a pot. And they were like, "Yeah, why'd you do that?" I go, "Yeah, sorry, I thought it would be contained, but mints like totally not." Um, and this is like the overall view. 18 towers. It was like repetitive, and it was all together on this catwalk. The architect was like, okay, it would have been great if it was all one roof, right? But really cool integrated project. We did microgreen production. We did these different pop-ups with different chefs, indigenous chefs. That's Brian Yazzie from the Sous Chef. He worked with Sean Sherman, some of you know, and Crystal Waipipa, both out of the Bay. Amazing events. And then the hedgerows. So they're like, this is like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. I'm like, yeah, man, check it out. The hedgerows were amazing what they were able to do, because these are native California perennials that normally don't get a lot of water and don't get a lot of nutrients. And now they're on this hybrid hydroponic growing platform, getting fed compost tea with biochar and everything. And they just like totally took off. Amazing. Um, and then they said, okay, let's replicate that at an acre. And it's like, okay. And so then let's boost up how we're going to do this. And so, a much different scale, but totally doable. And then integrating the ways in which we did the drains and putting in the medium. This is 1,200 cubic yards of material. It's about a little over 1,000,000+ pounds of weight on top of the building. So the engineering of that, and it's still a lightweight medium. And then this is it installed, right? Close to the rendering, a little different, not as many greenhouses, no greenhouse, right? They value engineered that out. There's still room for one. This is in the spring, right before, or right when planting's happening. So a lot of row covers, a lot of things happening. Native sections, native areas for pollinator and stormwater. 180 beds, high production market garden, grows a little over 25,000 pounds of food every year. That's grown to give to food hubs in the city of Oakland for free. So supported by USDA grants and Medicare dollars, looking at the health of the people through the food to reduce the inflammation of the gut from the overprocessed and non-organic healthy food that they're eating. And that's now in 4 years of production with the Deep Medicine Circle. And it's beautiful and amazing. And people walk up there and it reinvigorates the imagination of what's possible. Now, that same organization, again, so I was the director of land stewardship and agroecology, and we were working on a 28 acre or a 32 acre farm with 5 acre production on the coast that's looking at reconnecting, again, that context with the indigenous community into farming. 1 minute? 1 minute? You're supposed to give me like 5 minutes or something. Okay. Well, I'm not at the end, so that's good. And leaving it with like the imagination of what's next. And some of you who here hasn't heard of AgriHoods? I wouldn't be surprised so everyone here's heard of AgriHoods? No? Okay, good. Because I was like, damn, if you guys know AgriHoods, like South Dakota is the place to be. Because this is like deeper integration, not a golf course, not a, ornamental landscape. This is regenerative farm-centric housing developments. And looking at, this is a manual that's been put out. And there's 200 of these around the country already, where they're like a development for houses. People want a lifestyle. They're like, I want a lifestyle. I want to have a farm. I want to be close to the farm. It's like, well, let's design the development around a farm. And so Darren Jaffe and like myself, other people were getting asked by these developers, like, hey, can we put a farm on the roof? Can we put a farm in the community? And it's like, yes, the biggest trick, you need the farmer. It's like, I can design a really cool system, but we're going to need a skilled farmer to farm it, right? And they're like, oh, okay. It's like, no, not okay. There's not like a dime a dozen. It's like, you have to find a farmer who can lead and do it and inspire the next generation to get out there and work and sweat and not be on their computer, and be like invigorating and strong. And so Jean-Martin Fortier is a good friend. He's up in Canada. He's like really inspiring people around this market garden idea. So, the idea of building AgriHoods, and I'll leave it with this and think about this for the rest of the day. And I know I went over just a little bit. I hope that what I shared was inspiring, but what story do you want to tell the future around your farm, what you're doing? And it can be as elaborate or as simple as possible, but just understanding the story, because we're a story-based culture, and the story we tell will be how we live the future. So Thank you so much, and I look forward to chatting up with all of you. Thanks.